My mom had been crying. It was never a good sign when she made the trek down to my basement room. With horror movie posters hung at garish angles and punk rock music blasting on the reg, my room was strictly off limits for parents. High school garbage heaps only. I had a miscarriage, my mom said. I thought you should know. A couple years before, my mom had married her second husband, Daniel, who was the complete opposite of my dad. Loud, eccentric, and theatrical. Literally, he was like super into community theater. I liked Daniel. I liked the way he announced my name by rolling his tongue with faux Shakespearean flamboyancy. Ryan! But those reasons made him seem like a blatant rebound for my mom. The news of my mom's failed pregnancy sunk into my brain. I had been in the middle of one of my usual two-hour naps when she broke it, so I want to think what I said next was a product of being tired. I don't think it's really fair that you'd be trying to get pregnant, I said. I can't really articulate why I thought this would be unfair, but I do remember thinking, what's everybody at school gonna say? I also imagined more responsibility, less time hanging out with my buds, fewer chances to fuck off, fewer chances for 2-hour naps. You know, less time for nothing. Underneath all that, though, was this fear that my mom was replacing me. This baby, this little infiltrator, would be the apple of my mom's eyes, and I would be tossed aside, undeserving of her attention, even though outwardly I didn't want it anyway. So yeah, there were reasons for saying what I did other than me just being a typical teenage asshole, but let's not forget, that was a huge part of it. Because, I mean, having a kid with Daniel? I mean, nothing against the guy, but I imagine him breaking the news in his theatrical voice. Ryan, your mother and I are trying to conceive a child. Also, Daniel was a cat person, infecting a family that had been hitherto dog people. After my parents' divorce, my dad got custody of my childhood dog, Brittany, a.k.a. Britty, a.k.a. Brit, a.k.a. Brizzy, a.k.a. Zibby, a.k.a. Zib Zib. And my mom got 2 new dogs, Sophie and Sydney, which I think she did as an act of contrition or a way of trying to sell us on Daniel. Because it wasn't long after Daniel moved in that we also got Simon, a cranky orange tabby, and Winston, an emotionally unstable Siamese. 2 cats. Before her failed pregnancy, I surmised that these cats were my mom's first symbolic attempts to replace me. Whenever she and Daniel would cuddle on the couch and coo at his felines, I would look at my hand, expecting it to crossfade out of existence a la Marty McFly in Back to the Future. I directed seething, angry thoughts toward Daniel. You're not my dad. And then to Simon, you're not my cat. When it was our weekends with her dad, I'd rush over to Zib Zib and give her overcompensating belly rubs, paranoid that she felt my infidelity through every stroke of her tum-tum. 2 cats, I thought, viciously rubbing Zib Zib's lustrous belly fur, and now he wants a goddamn baby? Selfish. Unfair. The only word I could think of in my basement room underneath the horror posters and my mom crying. Unfair. I don't care if you think it's unfair, my mom replied. It's not really your choice. But it is my choice whether I want to live with you or not. It was the meanest thing I ever said. Yeah. God. It was the meanest thing I ever said to my mom. She left my room quietly. I felt smug victory. Score 1 for Ryan. This was my senior year of high school, and my mom and I spent the remainder of it regarding each other with little more than mutual respect. I said my love for my dogs, Zib Zib at my dad's house, and Sydney and Sophie at my mom's house. Sydney was an Australian shepherd, and Sophie was a tiny white dog of indiscriminate breed. Me and my brothers made up a voice for Sydney, which actually wasn't a voice, but more of a barf sound because we saw her barf once. Blah, blah, blah. Sophie didn't have a voice because she was perfect and still is. But hey, lucky for me, my mom didn't get pregnant during the remainder of my senior year. I got to get some serious hang time in with my pals, partied a lot, and was basically free of any responsibility. After high school graduation, I did my freshman year of college at UC Santa Cruz. It was the first time I had ever really been away from home, away from my dogs, away from my family. I'd sometimes call home and ask for money when my bank account was low. I'd see how the weather was in Utah and tell my mom how perfect it was in California. I convinced myself that our superficial conversations were signs of forgiveness and normalcy, and once I was able to delude myself about our relationship, I'd ask to speak to my little brother and sometimes the dogs if they were around. Blah, my brother would say. Oh, hi, Sydney. As the year went on, my brother began dropping hints that things back home were changing. Cracks in my mom and Daniel's relationship were beginning to show. I pretended like it didn't affect me. Our tension, in my mind, had resolved itself, and I was now an adult with no emotional investment in my mom's life. Then, late in the school year, my dad called me with news that Zib Zib had died. I said, "Oh, I'm sorry, Dad." And he said, "Yeah." And that's pretty much it. Up to that point, I never really talked about emotions with my dad, and conversations with my mom were now mainly about money and weather. Zib Zib's death was the floodgate that made me reassess my own role in the family. I had no one to grieve with. I missed my mom, and that whole year away, I had never told her. The sting of our argument felt sharper every day that I was away from home. So, after that first year of college, I moved back. But unloading all this emotional ish was easier said than done. How do you spring that on someone after spending a year emptying their bank account? A couple weeks back from school, I approached my mom, ready to spill all the feels. "Mom, I just wanted to say," but she cut me off. "Did you know that I hired a pet psychic?" Since being back home, I had noticed that she had acted a little differently. She seemed less authoritative, less parental, and I guess like really fucking weird. Like hiring a pet psychic weird. And I suppose this is the only way to tell your son that you've hired a pet psychic out of the blue. There's really no build up to that convo. No, "Hey, I'm thinking about hiring a pet psychic. Thoughts?" Winston was licking his fur off, my mom said, and I wanted to know why. Winston, who I liked because he seemed less likely to murder me for the role of replacement Ryan, had been emotionally unstable ever since we had him. He was skittish, could only be held by certain people, and occasionally licked the fur around his little cat butthole until it bled. The pet psychic's name was Julie Morgan, a name that my mom always used in its entirety, and a name that didn't necessarily instill a sense of cosmic wizardry as much as it did of a fleece vest wearing mountain hippie. Julie Morgan said Winston's all messed up, my mom said. Nothing we can really do about it. But Julie Morgan said Winston thinks Simon is a bully. Yes, Simon was a bully. But you couldn't really blame him for his temperament. He was declawed as a kitten, and shortly after that surgery, he fell off a 20-foot loft and broke his femur, which resulted in another surgery and a shaved chicken leg. So when my mom told me about Julie Morgan's profound revelation that Winston thought Simon was a bully, all I could do is think about Simon, declawed, listening to the way we laughed and mocked his chicken leg. A scene rendered in my memory with a slow-motion zoom-in on his little orange face. So yeah, Doy, he was a bully. Good job, pet psychic. My mom continued, and Sydney told Julie Morgan that she has a tummy ache and that she needed creamy yogurt to feel better. And once Sophie heard about the creamy yogurt, she wanted some too. In fact, all the pets now want creamy yogurt. Of course the dogs want yogurt, I thought. They don't want any human food. Blah, blah. Creamy yogurt? Blah. Julie Morgan could have said the same thing about steak or ravioli or a steaming plate of beef stroganoff, and my mom would have obliged, because Sophie and Sydney were my mom's girls. And that's when I got it. After her failed pregnancy, my mom took to those pets like they were her children. This, in addition to her failing marriage to Daniel. I can't imagine the loneliness of having nobody to support you during a painful year. Throughout this one-sided conversation, I had the words stuck in my throat. I missed you. I'm sorry. Something, anything to let her know that I was now here for her. Those words never came out. Yet, relaying this story about the pet psychic, I noticed that my mom seemed happier than I'd ever seen her. She had moved on with a new furry family, and that I didn't fit into her life in the way that I always expected to. Of course, I didn't deserve it. These animals would never tell her that it's unfair of her to plan another pregnancy. And get this, my mom said. Sophie wants a jacuzzi all for herself. But Julie Morgan warned us that Sophie wants it to be filled with cold water. At that point, my mom started laughing. We both cracked up. Of course, my mom knew that Julie Morgan was full of shit, but she was offering me an olive branch, that she wanted to bring me into her new family. Clean slate, forgiveness. When Daniel moved out, he left us with Simon and Winston. They turned out to be pretty dope cats, even though Simon remained a proud jerk for the rest of his life. But that's okay, because I could relate. A couple years later, my mom totally remodeled her deck by putting in a jacuzzi. On many cold nights, our family has sat in it, laughing, joking in a way that we never did before. But Sophie has never shown a desire to get in. Even though Julie Morgan's mystical powers may have inadvertently given my mom and I a better understanding of each other, she was still a pretty shitty pet psychic. Thanks.
That was Ryan Bradford.